Chapter 42-23. The first is more. The man in the iron skirt has a calm tone. The more he speaks later, the more he feels full of oppression. Wu Zhenshuang heard the words and smiled lightly. Are you pressing Tian Langjun to me? The leading man in the iron-armored skirt replied expressionlessly, Her Excellency, what I said was not meant to press you, but I hope that you can think of the powerful relationship. As far as I know, dare to intervene. None of the people in Lord Langjun are alive now.
Oh,
really? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, and then his voice suddenly became cold, and he smiled lowly. I'm sorry, I don't like to care about the consequences, especially Tianxi Langjun's thing. Next moment, Wu Jian's Excalibur sword without hands in the sword suddenly squirt. A fiery blood-colored sword mangling, rising into the sky. God to heaven! Suddenly, this Jian Mang was chopped towards the 5 ultimate masters. Presumptuous. Bold. 25 big iron-armored men suddenly changed their faces and shouted sharply. Immediately, the 5 of them used magical powers at the same time to block the sword Wushuang. With a loud blast, the ground began to tremble. After a moment, Jian Mang gradually dissipated. The 5 iron-armored men had no trace. Under this sword, they were directly turned into powder. With one sword out, the 5 ultimate dominators are killed at the same time. The sky gradually returned to clearness, and the sword intention belonging to the sword unparalleled, then turned into a divine power and dissipated in the void. The place where the 5 iron-armored men stood before has become nothing. Stuck under the sword Wushuang, the 5 of them were crushed into ashes without even issuing a scream. Did you kill them? Suddenly the Joshi maiden looked at the scene, and suddenly covered her mouth, widened her eyes and asked incredulously. Wu Zhenshuang heard the words, gave her a slight glance, and said, Why, I can't kill them. No, I just want you to help me stop them, but I didn't want you to kill them. Joshi Shengv said dully. Wu Wushuang heard the words, and could not help but laugh and said, Sir of Joshi, do you think I killed them to help you fail? After Zun said, Jian Wushuang did not wait for her to answer, and looked at Hao Emperor and said, Why are you still there? Go away. After saying that, Jian Wushuang walked slowly towards the distance. He killed the 5 ultimate masters, but it was because the 5 were just His Majesty the Heavenly Serpent King, and had nothing to do with the Joshi maiden. Since these 5 people are dead, Jian Wushuang naturally does not intend to have anything to do with the Joshi saint. Success! Zun Hao Emperor shouted a loud voice, then quickly reached out and waved at the maiden of Joshi. He laughed. Goodbye, Joshi. After Zun said, he quickly stepped behind Jian's body, and walked towards the distance. The maiden sister of Jushi she stood still, until Jian Wushuang was about to disappear at the end of her line of sight, and then she struck her teeth and shouted, Sir, please wait for me. After speaking, she quickly chased toward Jian Wushuang. After a short while, she came to Jian Wushuang. Mrs. Joshi, do you have anything else? Jian Wushuang frowned, asking slightly. His Excellency, how do you call it? Saint Joshi took a deep breath and asked. Blood sword. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and spit out the word briefly. Sister Ju 1111 nodded when she heard the words, and then said in a straight line, Her sword, do you know, you have done a great disaster.
Oh.
Catastrophe? Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow, and replied with a smile, How to say this? After hearing the words, the maiden of Joshi gradually became calm, and took a deep breath and replied, The 5 people who pursued and killed me were under the control of His Majesty the Heavenly Serpent King. I see the Lord Blood Sword and you seem to be the same as that Serpent King. Some resentment. Really? Jian Wushuang replied casually. Saint Joshi nodded her head and continued to ask, Her Lord of the Blood Sword, did you ever know Tianxi Langjun? After hearing the words, Wu Zhenshuang raised his eyebrows. When talking about Tianxi Langjun, he really only knew his name, and he didn't know the specific information. Want to hear the details? Jian Wushuang said calmly. Lady Joshi nodded her head, and slowly began to say, Tian Serang Langjun is the contemporary patriarch of the Tian snake family in the universe. Not only is the Tian snake family behind him, but his own combat power is extremely powerful. In the realm of domination, it can be called invincible. He came to Shinkong Ancient Road 8,000 years ago. When he first came to Shinkong Ancient Road, he even rushed into the 10 cities and went directly into the latter 8 cities to confront the top elders in the universe, causing a sensation. He is said to have been in the last 8 cities if he hadn't acted too arrogantly in the first 8 cities, causing a certain evil spirit to be arrogant and displeased. He would have been kicked out of the last 8 cities. However, although he was kicked out of the latter 8 cities, when it comes to combat power, he is definitely the top one in the dominating level and cannot be underestimated. Now, among the top 10 cities, Tianqi Langjun respects him except for the Lord Blue who guards the 10th city. Wu Jianwushuang heard the words and nodded. He heard that Tianqi Langjun's combat power was enough to be invincible. He was not surprised. After a pause, Jian Wushuang asked faintly, "Since that is the case, why don't you simply follow the King of the Snake? As far as I know, the Tian snake family is also a big family in the universe, and their strength is not better than you. The Joshi Holy Land is worse." After hearing the words, Sister Ju she gradually felt a horror of fear in her eyes, and her voice became hurried and said, "That's because you haven't seen Tianqi Langjun, you don't know his abnormality." Heh! Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, and there was a touch of curiosity in his eyes. "Her sword, do you know Saint Xixia?" The Joshi Saint Maiden asked. "I know a little or two." Jian Wushuang nodded his head. This Xixia Maiden is a contemporary maiden of another sacred place. The sacred place is stronger than Joshi Holy Place by its strength. Then did you know that? After the Prince Xixia was taken away by the Heavenly Serpent King, the whole person was sucked into a human body. The whole body of divine power was all taken away by the Heavenly Serpent King. The holy places where they live have a hatred against the Celestials. Speaking at the back, Saint Jux's voice became extremely frightened. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes when he heard the words, nodded, and made clear. Lady Joshi panted slightly, and after a while, she calmed down and said positively, "Bloodsword, Tian Snake Langjun is the man who must report. If you kill someone under his hands, he will not let you go. I urge your excellency to withdraw from the ancient road of Shinkong now, and do not kill yourself because of your efforts." Chapter 42-24. Second more. Saint Joshi looked at Jian Wushuang sincerely. All these words came from her heart. Wu Jianshuang saved her life. She really did not want to see Jian Wushuang died in vain. "It's nothing to worry about you," Jian Wushuang said with a faint smile. Joshi Shengv heard that she thought Jian Wushuang didn't believe what she said, and quickly and solemnly said, "Bloodsword, what I said just now isn't half exaggerated, and even the strength of Serpent King that day was better than what I said. Terror." I waited for her to finish speaking, and she was patted on the shoulder suddenly. She turned her head in doubt. I saw the master of Hoem glanced at her, shook his head, and laughed. "Sir of Joshi, I think you're wrong. Now it's not Tian Langjun who can't let go of the Bloodsword Master, but it's Master Bloodsword, and you don't want to let him go now. Do you understand?" After I finished speaking, they both ignored her and continued to move forward. Suddenly Ji Nuxi heard the words for a moment. She looked at the back of the two people, and suddenly felt that the two of them seemed to have this layer of fog, extremely mysterious. "No more, after all, he saved my life, I can't just watch him by and die." Joshi heard her bit her teeth and strode up. At the same time in the 8th city, in a magnificent palace, there is no light in it, and it looks extremely gloomy. At this moment, the closed door was slowly pushed open, and a ray of light gradually ran down the door. Immediately afterwards, he saw Yin Shenjun, bending over his waist, and came in frightened. The host. After Zun stepped into the hall, he made a sound and immediately knelt down on the hall floor. Immediately, he dropped his hands on the ground and moved his knees inch by inch. In the deepest part of the hall, there was a scarlet chair. A demon youth wearing mopping clothes with black hair scattered on his back, slowly opened his eyes. His face was hidden in the darkness, and a hoarse voice came out of his throat. "Yin slave, what about the Bloodsword's head?" The majestic Yin god in the 5th city is almost like a quail with a shrinking head at this moment. He heard his words tremble, buried his head on the floor, and said tremblingly, back to the master, the Bloodsword too strong, Yang Shenjun and I are not rivals." Deep in the darkness of the great hall, There was a silence first. Then the hoarse voice sounded again. What about Yang Yang? Master, Yang Shenjun was killed by that blood sword and killed with a sword. Yin Shenjun replied with respect. Oh. He's dead, so how did you come back alive? The young demon asked, without any emotion in his tone. Master, the blood sword asked me to give you a message, so I came back alive. Yin Shenjun replied, tell me a word. The young demon snorted and raised his lips. What is it? Yin Shenjun heard that, for a while, he was afraid to speak Jian Wushuang. He hesitated for a long time before he bit his teeth and said quickly, Blood sword, he said that you should wait for him here. It won't be long before he will come in and let me bury you. After I finished speaking, Yin Shenjun didn't dare to breathe, and his head buried on the floor was even lower. Suddenly, the demon young man was silent for a moment, then laughed loudly. Ha ha ha, interesting, so interesting? He even asked me to wait for him? Want you to bury me? The laughter was terrifying, and the whole hall shook violently because of the laughter. The tears of the evil young man laughed, and he wiped his eyes, looked at the Yin god kneeling on the ground, and sighed, Yin slave, you really listened to him. After hearing the words, the god of Yin suddenly felt cold and said quickly, Master, you misunderstood. He didn't wait for him to finish. The demon youth held out his scarlet tongue, licked the corner of his mouth, and smirked, Yin slave, how can you reward him? Suddenly, Yin Shenjun felt a chill, rushing straight from his spine to the top of his head. Only he knows how horrible the reward the young people are. Suddenly, the Yin was terrified. Master, forgive me, Master, please forgive me this time, I don't want to die. Huh. He raised his head, kept scratching his head for mercy, and hit the floor loudly. Dead? No, I just sent you to a beautiful place. The young demon smirked. Next moment, take a huge snake tail and suddenly shoot from the dark. Huh. Stinging this snake tail, he wrapped Yin Yinjin's body in one hand, and then pulled back, and immediately pulled Yin Shenjun into the darkness. In the hall, suddenly the shouting voice of Yin Shenjun came. After a few moments, the hall quieted down, leaving only the hissing sound of a viper, which was extremely eerie. At the deepest part of the hall, the demon youth opened his mouth, and two fangs bit deeply into the neck of Yin Shenjun. Countless divine power followed the two fangs of the demon youth and poured into the body of the demon youth. There was no sound in the mouth of the god of Yin, his body was constantly shaking, his legs were shaking and rubbing on the ground, and he could only look at the demon youth with horror. His face gradually changed from green to white, and then from grey to grey. Gradually, Yin Shenjun completely disappeared. It's all waste. The demon evil Jun loosened his mouth and stretched out the forked snake letter and licked the corner of his mouth. He shook his head, entangled with the snake tail of the demon god, slowly released back. Alas! The body of Yin King fell to the ground, his eyes widened, as if he had seen something that was extremely scary before he died. The demon youth did not bother, but stood up from his seat, step by step into the darkness, and walked to the gate of the temple. His eyes narrowed slightly under the bright light, and turned into a snake-like golden vertical pupil. Behind him, he dragged a long, black scale snake tail. Hit him, it's heavenly snake Lang Jun. Blood sword. Interesting, really interesting. I am looking forward to it more and more, the moment I see you. Wu Tian snake Lang Jun whispered and whispered, in his voice, there was endless ice cold. How can I reward you then? Sixth City. Wu Jianshuang, dominated by Hao Ember and Saint Niushi, the three have reached the central area of the Sixth City. A towering city appeared at the feet of the three. Lord of the Blood Sword, this is the central position of the Sixth City. Most of the ultimate masters of the Sixth City are gathered here. Saint Niushi introduced it beside her. Wu Jianwushuang nodded and said, well, go in. Chapter 42-25. The first is more. When I entered the city, the number of ultimate masters suddenly increased. One ultimate master hurriedly passed the three. Sister Joshi, are you okay? At this moment, a sound of surprise suddenly came from a distance. Soon afterwards, they saw a group of young men and women wearing purple clothes and dressed like the Maiden of Joshi, rushing to this side. They are. Jian Wushuang narrowed his eyes. Lord Bloodsword, They are a holy place with me. Seeing them, Saint Ju-shi smirked a smile on her face and waved at them. A few moments later, the young men and women came over. The young man and woman who shouted before was a young man with a magnificent face and a crown of jade. Bloodsword, this is the old master of looking for ancient people, and also the leader of our ancient journey to the Shinkong ancient holy land. This distant brother. Saint Ju-shi introduced with a smile. Wu Jiansu nodded his head slightly, saying hello. Sister Joshi, what is this? Brother Jiu looked at Jian Wushuang, wondering. Brother, this is the Lord of the Blood Sword, and his strength is unfathomable. It is because of him that I escaped the pursuit of Her Majesty's Iron Guard by the Serpent King. The Lady Joshi introduced with a smile. Is that so? Thank you very much, Lord Bloodsword. Lan Jiu looked at Xiong Jian Wushuang, and arched his hand with a smile. Lord Bloodsword, thanks to your shot, you saved Master Joshi, otherwise Master Joshi once fell into in the hands of the King of the Snake. The consequences are truly unthinkable. You're welcome. Jian Wushuang glanced at him and replied slightly. Where, Lord Bloodsword can save Master Joshi from the group of Iron Skirt Masters? It must be superior. Lord Bloodsword, is it supposed to be Tianjiao from a holy land and fuckingdom? Lan Jiu first moved in his heart, then asked with a smile on his face. Wu Jianwushuang narrowed his eyes upon hearing the words, and replied, Langus Master is too high to look at me. I am a nameless and should not be called Tianjiao. After reading the ancient news, the Qin could not help but raise it a little, and said with a smile, Your lord is humble. After speaking, he flipped his right hand, a Chenkuan ring appeared in his hand, and handed it to Jian Wushuang. Sir, there are 100,000 universe source stones in this Chenkuan ring. As my brother, thank you for my sister Xiu-shi. Lily. Wu Jianwushuang heard the words, looked at him faintly, and looked at him for a long time before shaking his head before saying, No, save the maiden of Joshi, but it's just me. This. Lan Jiu Wenyang glanced at Jian Wushuang, and then he no longer insisted, and took that Chenkuan ring back. A few people spoke a few words again, the maiden of the nine she standing next to Jian Wushuang, smiling and said, Bloodsword, where can you go now? Wu Jianshou shook his head when he heard the words, and calmly replied, No, not yet. Sister Ju 1111 smiled back and said, Bloodsword, why don't you come with us? On the way, I just want to tell you something about Tianxi Langjun. Wu Jianshuang groaned for a moment, then nodded, okay. His blood sword, Sister Joshi, this is not the place to talk to me, let's talk while walking. I just want to ask you something. Lan Jiu interjected with a smile. Brother, what's the matter? Wondered Joshi. Come here, I'll tell you slowly. Lan Jiu glanced at the sword unparalleled, and then turned to look at the maiden of Joshi and said, It is good. Saint Joshi stepped into Langus crowd. The people on both sides walked forward one after the other. Sword Master Wu Hao and Hao Emperor fell behind, and Hao Emperor looked at the back of Lan Jiu and others, muttering unpleasantly, Master Bloodsword, the people of the Joshi Holy Land may be too embarrassing. You saved them the life of the Holy Land Maiden. Did you just want to use 100,000 cosmic source stones to pass away? This is not enough for the use of the cosmic passage. Wu Jianshuang heard a smile and heard nothing. Lord Hao Ember continued to sneer and said, Master Bloodsword, look at them, and intentionally keep away from us. It seems that we are afraid to walk with us. Okay, just a few words. It was just to save the Joshi maiden. Jian Wushuang patted Hao Ember's shoulder and said lightly. Wu Hao Emperor nodded his head, no longer said, but just looking at the back of Lan Jiu and others, is still full of indecision. Not far ahead. Sister Joshi, do you know the origin of the blood sword? He even followed him. Lan Jiu, who was still smiling, immediately sank and said. After hearing the words, Sister Joshi Liu raised her eyebrows and asked, Brother, what do you mean? What is the word hybrid ? Lan Jiu looked at Juk Sai's not-so-comfortable face, and said slowly, Sister Jushi, brother, I just worry that you will be used by bad people. Think about it, that blood you do nt know the origin of the sword. It's such a person who does nt know the origin, even to offend Tianxi Langjun for someone you do nt know. Do you think this is possible? After the words fell, other disciples in Joshi Holy Land echoed, "Yeah, I have never heard of the name of this blood sword." The brother asked where he came from earlier, and he also don't say, "I think it must be speculation." Sister Joshi, in my opinion, this blood sword is either trying to use you to approach our Joshi Holy Land to climb the relationship, or he is simply the man of Tien Snake Langjun, just acting in front of you. Saint Joshi heard the words, her eyebrows gradually cooled, her eyes glanced over them, and her face frosted. "Do you know what you are talking about?" "That blood sword, but my life-saving man." "Sister, don't be excited, everyone just said that because of fear." Lan Jiyu said a relief, and then Feng Feng said, "Let us talk to us, the blood sword saved you. What is the process?" The sacred girl Ju 1111 took a deep breath and nodded her head slowly, then said it again when Jian Wushuang rescued her. "What? The blood sword actually beheaded the 5 iron skirt masters? It's over. It completely offends Tianxi Langjun this time. He will never give up." "Oh, we were still thinking about going to Tianxi Langjun to go to the door to make amends and reconcile this matter. Now that this is the case, it is estimated that reconciliation is impossible. The blood sword is really not harmful, even if it offends Tianxi Langjun, it also pulls us into the water. Now it is fine, Tianxi Langjun will certainly not let us go." "Yeah, what should I do now? Tianxi Langjun will definitely come to us for trouble." Chapter 42-26. Second more. These disciples of Joshi Holy Land sighed. Seeing the slightest stunned maiden, Joshi looked at these brave brothers who were so arrogant in the mouth on weekdays, full of disbelief. She thought that after she had finished speaking, these brothers would dispel the view of Jian Wushuang, and even unite with the enemy, and join with Jian Wushuang to slay Tianxi Langjun together. However, she did not expect that her brother's fear of Tianxi Langjun had been engraved in her bones. After hearing that she was chased and killed by His Majesty Tianxi Langjun, she was immediately rescued by Jian Wushuang. It turned out that they felt the sword unparalleled. How ridiculous is this? Gradually, the disbelief in her eyes turned into a stranger and disappointment. The master of Lan Jiyu was not very good-looking, but he keenly captured the expression of the maiden of Joshi, and his eyes moved suddenly, staring at the holy disciples behind him, and his face was cold, and he scolded, "What are you saying? Word! The blood sword saved the Joshi maiden, which is a big favor for us. It is how you blame him." After he finished speaking, those disciples in the holy place suddenly shrank their heads, but there was still an indiscriminate expression of complaint between their eyebrows. "Brother, originally the blood sword just had to chase away the 5 iron skirt masters. Why kill them? Now we are all right, we have turned our face with Tien Serang Jun, and Tien Serang Jun really fell into anger. Come, the blood sword is good, and you can leave by tapping on the buttocks, and no one knows him anyway. But what do we do? Why does the person killed by the blood sword count on our head?" Disciple muttered quietly, "To shut up." The Lord of Langu gave him a glance, and then immediately looked at the maiden of Joshi, exhaled a little, and said with a bitter smile, "Sister Joshi, don't blame your brother for being straightforward. Although the words of the deserted brother just now are awful, but it is not without reason. The practice of the blood sword is indeed too reckless. It was actually the best way to negotiate with the Snake Prince that day. After all, Tianxi Langjun is the best. After all, we have to look at the face of our Joshi Holy Land. As a result, he killed the people under his hand and negotiated. It must be impossible." Sister Ju 1111 heard the words and looked at the faces of Lan Jiyu, Kuang Yi, and others, only feeling cold for a while. It turned out that the brothers I worshipped before were just such a group of greedy people who were afraid of death. With a last glimmer of hope in mind, Saint Joshi took a deep breath and asked, "Brother, what should we do now?" Master Zangu smiled and replied, "Sister and sister, rest assured, brother and I are not afraid of things, but that day, the Snake King is strong, and with our few, we are indeed not opponents for the time being." Sister Ju, she heard her brow and frowned. The master of Lan Jiyu continued to laugh, "Sister and sister, but rest assured, I have already inquired. The sixth city master Tianzang Shenjun is preparing to host a banquet to entertain the Tianjiao rookie in the sixth city. So I'm in the invitation list of Tian Kang Shenjun." A little later, I will take you to the dinner party of Tian Kang Shenjun. Speaking of which, it is extremely proud that Lan Jiyu lived on his face with an unconscious rush of pride, as if he could be invited by the of heaven. After a pause, he continued, Sister, you may not know that Sungshen Jun had not dealt with Tianxi Langjun that day. In the early years, he was almost destroyed by the Tianxi Langjun. We were at the dinner party, maybe then they can say that the god of heaven Kang moves, and with us, we fight against the king of heavenly serpent. In this case, even if Tianxi Langjun is strong again, there will be some scruples. Sister Ju, she heard the words and couldn't help moving. Shi Tiansang God naturally knows who she is, but she is a veteran ultimate master who has impregnated more than 10 chaos eras at the ultimate master level. Her strength is beyond doubt and she is definitely a strong one in the ultimate master level. If the god of heaven Kang really can help them resist the king of the Snakelang together, maybe he has a chance to resist the king of the Snakelang. It is good. Lady Joshi nodded her head and said, Brother, I'll tell this thing to Lord Bloodsword. After all, the fact that Lord Bloodsword killed the Lord of the Serpent Kinglang has an unavoidable relationship with me. I have to invite him to join us for the night feast of the god of heaven. This. Lang Jiyu heard a word, hesitation flashed on his face, but looking at the firm look of the maiden of Joshi, he nodded helplessly. Okay, as long as the blood sword is in order, not here it's enough to have trouble at the banquet of the god of heaven. The maiden sister Shi Joshi smiled slightly when she heard the words. Without a reply, she turned towards the two men behind Jian Wushuang. Yang Langu watched the back of the maiden of Joshi, her eyes narrowed gradually, and a loud cry came out of her nose. Bloodsword, come with us to attend the night feast of the god of heaven, said the maiden of Nine Shi, who walked to the front of the sword without two sides, and said with a sweet smile. Tiansang God. Night feast. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow. Her, god of heaven is the first person recognized in this sixth city. We may be able to seek his asylum and fight against king of heavenly Snakelang together. Joshi Virgin smiled and smiled followed by, Saint Joshi told the story of the god of heaven, and told Wushuang sword again. After listening to Wu Jiansu, he groaned for a while and shook his head. I will not go to the dinner party of Kang Shenjun that day, you go. The Snakelang Jun, I will deal with it myself. The maiden of Joshi heard the words and immediately hurriedly said, her blood sword, that day, the Snake King was very powerful. We alone will never be his opponents. Only by combining the strength of all of us can it be possible. Go to battle with Serpent King that day. Little sister, Lord Bloodsword is unwilling to go, don't just force others, maybe Lord Bloodsword is a daring artist, you really don't need our help. At this moment, Langu suddenly came over and said with a smile. Brother. Saint Ju, she heard the words, and suddenly she was angry, and her eyes were spitting and looking at Langu. Her mind is always sensitive. How can she not see the potential animosity of Lan Jiyu to the sword unparalleled? Jiyu Lan Jiyu Wenyang ignored him, but looked at Xiong Jian Wushuang with a smile, and said, my blood sword, am I right? Wu Jianshuang heard the expression calm, and said gently, that's right. After a pause, Jian Wushuang arched his hand, and said calmly, Lord Jiyu, Lord of the Nine Suns, we might as well make a difference here. After saying that, Jian Wushuang ignored them, and took how Ember to dominate, and then walked away. Chapter 42-27. The first is more. Lord Bloodsword. Wu Joshi was anxious, and as soon as she wanted to chase, she was caught by Lan Jiyu. Little sister, don't forget, you and us are on the side. The Bloodsword is just a stranger outside, do you care so much about him? And you also saw that it was not me who drove him away, but himself go. The glorious look of Jiyu Lan was pale, and he said in a bad tone. Saint Joshi ignored her, and wanted to go up to chase Jian Wushuang, but was caught by Langus' big hand and couldn't move. After a short while, the figure of Jian Wushuang gradually disappeared at the end of her sight. The maiden of Joshi had to give up the resistance and looked coldly at Langu. Huang Langu looked at the maiden of Joshi, inexplicably, a tremor in his heart. He saw strangeness and disappointment that he had never seen before. Sister Joshi, let's go, Tian Kang Shenjun's banquet is about to begin. Lan Jiyu forced a smile on his face. Wu Joshi, the maiden, nodded her head and walked along with Langu. Yang Langu took a deep breath, and a flash of firmness flashed in his eyes. Sister Jushi, I must show you, only me in this world is the only person you can rely on. As for the blood sword, he wants to go to death by himself, so let him go. Originally, there was no night and day in the universe, but because the adult who opened up the ancient road of the sky said that there must be, so in the ancient road of the sky, there was night and day, and stars changed. That night, there was a starry sky in the sixth city. Wu Jian sat cross-legged in a void, and Hao Emperor stood behind him respectfully. Master Bloodsword, the banquet of the god of heaven Kang begins. Hao Emperor said in a low voice. Wu Jian Wushuang nodded his head, looking down the endless nebula, looking down. I saw the central location of the vast sixth city. In a splendid palace, there was a song and dance leveling up. Many of the strongest in the sixth city, or the star-studded star show like the ancient ones, were sitting cross-legged and pushing cups for a change. Talk and laugh. The night feast of the Emperor Tianzong can be described as the grand event of the entire sixth city. Basically, the sixth city's heads and faces were invited to the banquet. Master Bloodsword, with your ability to enter the night feast of the god of Kang, it is a breeze. Do we really not go? Hao Ember asked. Wu Jian Wushuang heard his words and retracted his eyes, then shook his head and said, No, I just hope they don't come out and make trouble when I find Tianxi Langjun. After he finished speaking, Jian Wushuang got up and stood up, and said, Let's go, we should meet the Tianxi Langjun. Also, Hao Emperor dominated the picture of Jian Wushuang Yijian beheading the yin and yang god, and he couldn't help but twitch his lips, and his face was filled with confidence. Now he has no doubt about Jian Wushuang's combat ability. In the middle of the night, Jian Wushuang and Hao Ember dominated the two, like a lone passerby, quietly left the sixth city and disappeared into the vast night. After 10 days, with an invincible posture, Jian Sword Wushuang beheaded and killed the seventh city master Yaohuang, and reached the top of the seventh city. 13 days later, Qi Jian Wushuang entered the eighth city. The eighth city, the Temple of Heavenly Snake. Master Langjun, the blood sword has stepped into the eighth city. In the dark hall, a servant stepped in and hurriedly said Voldemort. Hissing. A voice resembling a snake vomiting a letter came from the deepest part of the hall. Then, I saw a demon youth wearing a mopped silk robe, black hair spreading his back, and a golden pupil. Out of the darkness. Oh, it really made me wait. Tian Snake Langjun twisted his neck and made a click. He is not half afraid of Jian Wushuang's arrival, instead, he is full of interesting novelty and playfulness. Where is he now? Tianxi Langjun asked, looking down. Master, the blood sword should have just passed the gate of the eighth city at this moment. The servant answered with a respectful voice. Tian Snake Langjun nodded when he heard the words, carrying his hands on his back, looking through the hall to the far gate. In his eyes, gold flashes. Go and find the blood sword first, and tell him that after 3 days, the prince will wait for him in the Temple of the Serpent. Tian Serang said. Yes. The servant heard the words, and then he planned to step down. At this moment, the faint voice of Tianxi Langjun came again. Go and inform Morrow and Blackbird again. 3 days later, before this temple, kill the blood sword. The servant could not help but tremble when he heard the words, and resigned in congratulations. Tian Snake Langjun looked at the back of the servant who was gone, stretched out his forked tiny tongue, and licked his lips, showing a cruel color in his eyes. The eighth city, at the gate. Dominated by Jian Wushuang and Hao Ember, walking slowly. Some past eighth cities are the ultimate masters. After seeing the two, the pupils shrink, and they whispered and discussed. I heard that in the first 8 cities, some people beheaded and killed Lord His Majesty the Lord, and said that he would personally pacify the Temple of the Snake. It seems that he is this person. This person is a blood sword. Go, let's stay away from him. Here is this person, to challenge Lord Langjun. Ignorant is fearless. This blood sword can come into this 8th city, and it is also a heavenly pride. Unfortunately, he should not challenge Lord Langjun, an ultimate master of the 8th city. While discussing, he quickly looked at Jian Wushuang. They seemed to be afraid of being in a relationship with Jian Wushuang, and they quickly distanced themselves from Jian Wushuang. Bloodsword Master, it seems that the 8th city is not very welcoming to us. How Emperor noticed the eyes of the people around him, and sneered. Wu Zhenshuang smiled at the words and said, "Why should we welcome them? That's true, too." How Emperor nodded, his mouth twitched. He immediately opened his eyes and stared at the ultimate master of the whispered discussions on the side of the road, fiercely rebuked. "What are you doing?" "Yes, it is you, yo, are you still? Believe me or not you? Hey, try another one." The ultimate masters at the roadside suddenly became angry when they heard the words. "Look for death." They were about to start, and they seemed to think something, and then sneered. "Well, anyway, you offend Tianxi Langjun, and you can't live long. Is it such a group of people who come to challenge Lord Langjun? I see how you'll die in the future." They all sneered with arms folded. "Yo!" How Emperor curled up his sleeves and immediately looked like he was about to attack. "Well, don't pretend here." Jian Wushuang couldn't help laughing, patted How Ember's shoulders. How Emperor dominated the news and scratched his head, and he replied, "I'm not a fox and a tiger, and frighten them, who told them to look down on people first." Chapter 42-28. Second more. At this moment, a golden light suddenly radiated from the depths of the 8th city. Soon after, she saw Jin Guang disperse, and an old man stood in front of the sword without two sides. "You're a blood sword." The old man held his head high, looked down at Jian Wushuang with an expressionless expression, and asked indifferently, "It's me." Jian Wushuang folded his smile and nodded calmly. "Blood sword, I am the servant of His Majesty the Great Snake Langjun. Lord Langjun has orders to tell me to tell you." I didn't wait for him to finish. "But a small servant is worthy of standing on top of me." Qi Jian's eyes were cold, and he broke them with one finger. A sharp sword orn splits from the sword fingerless moment. "Blood sword, you." When the old man changed his face and was about to speak, he saw the sharp swordman slashing towards him, breaking his defense directly, and pressing a sword on his shoulder. "Come off." The indifferent voice spit out from Jian Wushuang's mouth. The next moment, the old man was chopped down by a sword and fell to the ground. Jian Wushuang raised his head, looked down at the old man with his chin, and said lightly, "Come and tell me now, what do you want to do?" The old man was embarrassed when he saw this, and when he heard his face turned red, he looked up and said to Jian Wushuang quickly, "Bloodsore, I will inform you with Lord Langjun's life. 3 days later, he will wait for you to come to the door in the Temple of the Snake." 3 days later? Jian Jianhui's eyes flashed with light, and after a little groaning, he nodded slightly. "Well, then you go back and tell your master, 3 days later, the blood sword will be on the door on time and set foot on the Temple of Heaven Serpent." The old man heard the words, a flash of anger flashed in his eyes, but was frightened by Jian Wushuang's sword, and he dared not say anything more. After a cold hum, he hurried from the ground and excited towards the distance. "Shoot away." After waiting for the old man to leave, How Emperor quickly said, "Master Bloodsword, that day, the Snake King said that 3 days later, I was afraid there was fraud." Wu Zhenshou heard the words, shook his head, and replied, "It doesn't matter." At the same time, he raised his head slightly, and looked at the main mansion of the 8th city, the position of the Temple of the Snake, and squinted his eyes. "Don't let me down. Master Bloodsword, where are we going now?" How Ember asked, scratching his head and scratching his head. "Find a place to rest," Jian Wushuang said. After waiting for Jian Wushuang to leave, the 8th city suddenly exploded. After 3 days, the Queen Snake King made a news about the Sword Warriors Temple, spreading wildly. 3 days later, the King of the Snakes will fight the Blood Sword at the Temple of the Snakes. Blood Sword releases words, 3 days later, on time to step on the door and set foot on the Temple of Heavenly Serpent. It's the first time someone has challenged Tian Snake Langjun since it came to the 8th city. For a while, there were rumors about Jian Wushuang fighting with Tianxi Langjun. The word blood sword spread across the 8th city at an extremely fast speed, and the hustle and bustle raged around. Who is that blood sword? What is the origin of the blood sword? There are more people, and began to guess the identity of Jian Wushuang. The night was getting dark, at the gate of the 8th city. A group of young men and women in purple clothes carefully entered the 8th city through the door of the passage. Seeing no one outside the passage, the young men and women were relieved. Snake Langjun had a huge influence in the 8th city that day. Almost everyone in the 8th city obeyed Tianxi Langjun. When we come here, we have to be careful. The young man headed by this group of young men and women, Yu Xianang, with a face like a crown, said. Brother said. It is still thoughtful that Brother Lan Jiyu thinks. The young men and women in purple clothes nodded in agreement. This group of young men and women is truly a disciple of Joshi Holy Land headed by Lan Jiyu. Saint Joshi was intertwined with it, her complexion, and no echo. Langu glanced at her, shook his head, and then turned to look at a man with a beard next to him, and asked, Tiansong God, this time we kill Tianxi Langjun, what should we do? This name-bearded man stood tall with his hands in his hands, and as imposing as the mountains, he is the master of the 6th city, God of Heaven. He originally had a deep blood feud with Tianxi Langjun, but it was only because his strength was on the front line that he was far behind. At the night banquet, Langu just said that he planned to kill Tianxi Langjun, and the two parties made a snap and came to this 8th city. The God of Heaven Kang heard and said, the King of Serpents and Kings was very powerful that day. Although I may not be able to fight with one another when we are united together, we still have to be cautious. I suggest that I wait to inquire first and wait for the opportunity to sneak in. In the Temple of Heavenly Serpent, try to find a way to kill the King of Heavenly Serpent King when he is not ready. After glimpsing the ancient masters, he nodded in deep thought. He turned back and instructed, Master Laguna and Master Xuanshan, you two sneaked into the city and inquired about the news of the Heavenly Serpent King. Yes. Immediately, the two disciples of Joshi Holy Land stood out from behind, arching hands. The ancient ruler looked at a mountain outside the city and said to the others, let's go there and wait for news. A few moments later, several people disappeared at the entrance of the passage. In a day, it's a flash. The penultimate day of the decisive battle between Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake God. Outside the 8th city, on the dark mountains. The deserted master and the hunting mountain master who came out to inquire about the news came back. Brother, the big thing is not good. The blood sword even openly challenged the Heavenly Serpent King. The two have an appointment and will fight in the Heavenly Serpent Temple 2 days later. The masters of the Kuangyangi and the masters of the mountain hunting hurriedly came to say what? That blood sword openly challenged Tian Snake Langjun? Immediately, Lan Gus' face sank, and his expression was ugly. This blood sword is a fool. You thought you could kill the Lord of the Serpent King, and you can fight against the Serpent King? Arrogant and arrogant. Langu, you must pay attention to your words, you must not insult Lord Bloodsword. 9 Prince Ju Shi, who had always looked complex, suddenly changed her path. Jiyu Langu heard a heavy snoring, and did not say more. After hearing the words, God Tiansong wondered, Langu, who is that Bloodsword? Bloodsword. A nameless pawn, nothing worth mentioning. Immediately, Lan Jiyu said the sword unparalleled thing again, with a cold expression. The Bloodsword is seeking death by myself, I can't control it, but am afraid that we will delay our plan. Strict precautions will be taken, I'm afraid we won't mix so well. After hearing the words, the God of Heaven, for a while, immediately waved his hands, sneer and said, it's okay, let's let the Bloodsword be the cannon fodder. After the Bloodsword was killed by Tian Serang Jun, slay from the dark and kill Tianxi Langjun in one shot. A glance at Jiyu Wenyan's eyes flashed. Immediately, he sneered sneerly, this is a wonderful plan, so let the Bloodsword die first. Saint Joshi listened to the dialogue, her heart sank suddenly. Chapter 42-29. The first is more. In 3 days, it flashed. In an attic, Jianwu crossed his knees, his eyes opened suddenly. A fascination flickered from Jianwu's eyes. Time is up, go and settle on the Temple of Heavenly Serpent. Jian Wushuang stood up and walked toward the Temple of Heavenly Serpent. How Emperor follows behind, and walks step by step with sword Wushuang. On this day, the 8th city is full of people shaking. Inside the Temple of the Snake. Tian Snake Langjun also got up and stood up, stretched out his forked tongue, and licked the corner of his mouth. Blood Sword, it's time to reward you. At the end of the 8th City Royal Road, Jian Wushuang stood up and stepped out. Initially, Jian Wushuang's speed was extremely slow. Over time, Jian Wushuang's footsteps became faster and faster, and finally turned into a horizontal thunder between the heavens and the earth, the thunder roaring under his feet, and his body soared into the sky. Blood Sword, look at the Temple of Heavenly Snake. The next moment, Jian Shuang's voice fell like a thunder from the air and exploded over the Sky Snake Temple in the 8th City. At this moment, everyone in the 8th City is gathered here and attracts everyone's attention. It has started. Everyone raised their heads, looked at the vanity of the pedals, and stood on top of the Temple of Heavenly Serpent Sword Wushuang, squinting their eyes at the same time. They know that the battle between the Blood Sword and the King of the Serpent and the King of the Snake started from this moment. The next moment, I saw more than 20 ultimate masters wearing iron skirts rushing out of the Temple of Heavenly Serpent. They took a long axe in their hands and wore battle armor, just like the legendary heavenly gods would. One step before the sword had no double sides, blocking him outside the gate of the Heavenly Serpent Temple. Blood Sword, Lang Jun has orders. If he wants to fight with him, he must pass our level first. The more than 20 Iron Skirt Masters have a strong breath, and they are the same as the 5 Iron Skirt Masters that the Sword Wushuang beheaded in the 5th City. This is the 28 Iron Skirt Guards of Tianxi Langjun. It seems that if Blood Sword wants to defeat Lord Tianxi Langjun, he must defeat His Majesty's strength first. In this case, even if the Blood Sword can really fight the Tianxi Langjun in the end, there will not be much power left. Everyone saw this scene and talked about it. At the end of the crowd, Lord Lan Jiyu, Tiansong God and others were watching this scene. Lord Langu shook his head and sneered, "This Blood Sword is really stupid. You must openly challenge Tianxi Langjun. Are you all right now?" His Majesty Tianxi Langjun's masters are emerging one after another. "I see how many Blood Swords can kill." Tiansong Shenjun also said faintly, "Langu, this Blood Sword is nothing but a brainless man, we don't need to control it." Stuck. The God of Heaven Kang continued to say, "Langu, we are always ready. As soon as the King of the Serpent and the King comes out, we will kill in one shot." The ancient master heard the words and nodded. Temple of Heavenly Snake, outside the gate. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. When he was in the ruins of Tai Luo, he could dominate the strength at the 4th level, and defeated the King of the South, the 3 princes, and Yin Peng to the 3-party alliance with 1 enemy and 100. Now he breaks through to the 5th level to dominate the repair, and his strength has soared more than a few times. More than 20 iron skirts in this area dominate, and naturally he will not be taken into account. "Well, then I will cut off your wings and come and kill you again." Jian Wushuang murmured to himself, and then Wu Weapon's sword appeared in his hands. The sharp and overwhelming sword intention rose to the sky, as if to cut the heavens and the earth into 2 sections. The next moment, Jian Wushuang looked down at the more than 20 iron skirt guards, his eyes flashed coldly to the extreme. "Whoever stops me, who dies?" Jian Wushuang's footsteps slammed, Wu Jian's magic sword flashed on the sword, and the two turned into a sword horn that penetrated the sun and the earth, killing more than 20 iron skirt guard. Reject. More than 20 iron skirt guards looked dignified, stepped forward, and chopped axe forward at the same time. The axe lights suddenly joined together, turning into a wave of ground-breaking light, splitting towards the sword unparalleled. But everything is useless. With a sword slash, the more than 20 iron skirts dominated, and the body began to collapse at the same time. This swordman directly runs through these 20 iron skirts. Call out. Immediately after, the figure of Jian Wushuang gathered behind these 20 iron skirts who dominated him. But at this time, the 20 or so iron skirts dominated the whole body before it was completely shattered. One sword beheaded the ultimate master of more than 20. Suddenly, all the people watching the city were shocked. Although more than 20 iron skirts dominate, although they are not strong in terms of individual strength, they are united. Even if they are the top powerhouse in the ultimate domination, they must avoid the three-pointer. After the crowd, Lan Jiyu dominated, Tian Kang Shenjun and others, their pupils shrank. I didn't expect, I underestimated this blood sword. Lan Gus's eyes flickered in his eyes, and he hummed coldly. On that day, Kang Shenjun squinted his eyes, and then shook his head and said, "These 20 iron skirt guards are just ordinary people in the ultimate level. It's nothing, if I change it, I can do it." The Lord of the Ancients nodded his head and replied, "That's a good thing. The 20 or so iron skirt guards are just appetizers. If the blood sword has this strength, it is worse than the heavenly serpent king. Too far." At the same time, deep in the temple of the snake, Tian Snake Lang Jun sat on the big chair, and the eyes of the pair of golden vertical pupils flickered, penetrating directly into the void, and saw a sword Wushuang who killed more than 20 iron skirt guards with one sword. Well, it's no wonder that yin and yang slaves are not their opponents, but they still have some strength. Tian Snake Langjun said with a faint smile on his face. The next moment, he stuck out his salive-splitting tongue and said, "Morrow, Blackbird, you will meet this bloodsword for me." "Yes." A dull voice sounded from the back of Tianxi Langjun. Immediately afterwards, I saw the endless darkness behind the big chair where Tianxi Langjun sat, and 2 red lights lit up. That is a pair of huge scarlet eyes. These eyes are as huge as hanging red lanterns, and they emit a dark red light. They are not like humans, but rather huge monsters. Immediately, I saw these eyes, rising as if there were monsters, waking up from a deep sleep, and standing up from the ground. Rumble. In this huge hall, a dull and loud noise began to make. The next moment, we saw a humanoid monster as high as nearly 10 feet, coming out from behind Tianxi Langjun. This monster is huge and looks like an iron tower. His skin was dark black, muscles bulging up like steel, and the horror veins that were thick like arms were prominent on the surface of the skin and twisted like a tree root. The monster's eyes were like a red lantern, emitting red light, and the 2 fangs on the lower lip turned out and rose to the nostril position. On top of his head, there was a pair of curved sharp horns piercing the sky as if to break through the sky. Chapter 4230. Second more. Tian Snake, I and the other 2 have recovered nearly 50% of their strength, and after we have solved this person for you, we will be broken. A dull sound came from the monster's mouth. "Okay, Mo Luo Black Cricket, as long as you kill the man in the hall, you can regain your freedom and return to the last 8 cities." Tian Snake Langjun nodded. This monster with fangs and horns didn't say much after hearing it, and walked step by step outside the hall. Every step he took, the earth shook. His figure, completely out of the darkness, saw on his shoulders a childish boy with a wooden flute in his hands and a pigtail in his hair. Step by step, the huge monster disappeared into the temple of Heavenly Serpent. Tian Snake Langjun, still sitting on the big chair, with a smile on his mouth, could not see what he was thinking. After the 8 cities. He looked up and muttered to himself. Outside the temple of the snake. Jian Wushuang's expression was calm, as if he had just done a trivial little thing, and continued to move forward step by step. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to step into the temple of the snake, the vision above him suddenly became dark, and all the light was blocked. "Huh? What's going on?" Jian Wushuang frowned, and looked up in doubt. A huge scruffy human face suddenly appeared above him, and those huge eyes like red lanterns were staring at him. "This is..." Jian Wushuang's face changed immediately. He could feel that the monster's power in front of him was as huge as the ocean. "Mora family." Suddenly, those in the distance watching the 8th city, exclaimed suddenly. The Mo Luo family is not a big family in the universe because of the sparse individual, but each Mo Luo is extremely powerful. They do not practice rules and magical powers, but the physical body is inherently powerful, with the power of tearing the sky and pinching the stars between the palms and feet. Every Moro has the ability to fight across borders. Everyone looked at this Mo Luo, and they all whispered. I heard that when Tianxi Langjun was in the last 8 cities, he once saved a Mo Luo, but unexpectedly, the Mo Luo went back to the 8th city with him. Mo Luo is the fighting power of the latter 8 cities. Although I heard that he was seriously injured at the beginning, I don't know if the strength has been restored, but it is enough to kill all the masters under the invincible master. Look, that's the blackbird. The black owl, the companion of the Mo Luo, is responsible for learning supernatural powers and manipulating the body of the Mo Luo. Each Mo Luo with the black Mu will be much more powerful than the ordinary Mo Luo. Exclaimed discussion. Jian Wushuang looked at the huge monster in front of him, his brows frowned tightly. Without waiting for him to think about it, he saw that Mo Luo had raised his huge dark arm and pressed him down hard. Before this arm was depressed, the incidental wind was already twisting in the void, making a terrible sound-breaking sound. Good job. The sword in Wushan's eyes soared by 3 inches, and Wu Chong's magic sword in his hand was quickly pulled out and cut to the palm that covered the sky. Suddenly, the sharp and cold sword rushed into the sky, the sword Wushuang no longer kept his hands, and the third source of kendo broke out, cooperating with his more than 13,000 times the power of power to blast open at the same time. Zizi. Wu Weeping Sword was chopped on that giant palm. Since being strengthened by Tai Luo Sword Spirit, the invincible Wu weapon's Excalibur has encountered obstacles, just marking a long string of golden sparks. And that palm, after a moment of stagnation, they pressed again towards the sword without a double. What? Unscathed? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, his face filled with astonishment, and at the same time he stepped on his right foot quickly, his figure leaped backwards, avoiding this palm. An earth-shattering explosion came, and Mo Luo's palm was photographed on the ground, and a huge 5-finger handprint pit that was dozens of feet deep was shot directly. The white airwave turned upside down, and at this moment, the void made a sound of click like glass breaking. In the 8th city, many of the ultimate masters who watched the battle from afar, looked at this palm, all changed their colors. You know, the ancient road in the starry sky is protected by the rules made by that adult. Under the rules, the palm of Mo Luo can cause such a terrible destructive force. If it is placed outside, I am afraid even an asteroid will be broken directly by this palm. Little guy, don't struggle. In the mouth of Mo Luo, a low, indifferent sound was made. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath, and finally there was a dip in his eyes. Sure enough, this starry sky is indeed the place where all the cosmos of the universe, the Tianjiao, are gathered. The Mo Luo who came out of the last 8 cities, even today, has to wait for him. And Jian Wushuang looked at Mo Luo's shoulder, and the child with a wooden flute sitting cross-legged was more dignified in his eyes. Compared with this huge and horrible Mo Luo, this child who has not said a word from beginning to end and closed his eyes, poses a greater threat to him. Converging his thoughts, Jian Wushuang said coldly, "Open the sky, boom." As soon as the voice fell, Wu Cry Excalibur quickly trembled, and issued a cry of demon cry. The Buddha groaned. Immediately afterwards, a huge swordman was cut out. This sword is so beautiful that it folds into the void in an instant, and is cut off towards the head of Mo Luo. Roar. Under this sword, Mo Luo opened his mouth and blew a roar that shook for 9 days and 10 places. At this moment, the horrifying sounds condensed into substance, spreading out from Mo Luo's mouth in circles. However, in the face of Jian Wushuang's former killer, Kai Tianyi sword, this sound wave just persisted for a few time, then it was broken by the swordman, and it was chopped off again towards the head of Maruo. Mo Luo's pair of scarlet pupils suddenly shrank, raising his arms to block. The blood-colored swordman, with a beautiful sword shadow, severely slashed on Moruo's arms. This time, it was still just a series of sparks, but it was extra, accompanied by the roar of Mora's pain. I saw a light white mark on his arm. Little guy, you irritate me. Mo Luo roared, and immediately stepped down, rushing towards the sword unparalleled. The entire 8th city trembled quickly because of Mora's flight. Kill. In the eyes of Jian Wushuang, the hunting and fighting intentions soared into the sky. Facing Mo Luo who flew towards him, there was no concealment on his face, and he quickly killed Mo Luo too. The speed between the two is getting faster and faster, and finally, like 2 meteorites, they hit each other fiercely. The sword of Wu weapon with no hands in his sword was severely split on Moruo's fist. Both of them were shocked. Chapter 42:31. The first is more. At this moment, Moruo's huge and burly body was covered with sword marks that were deeply visible. These sword marks were densely intertwined, like spider webs, and terrifying. Puff! The scarlet god's blood sprayed out from him, like a blood rain in the 8th city. Snoring, snoring. Mo Luo's pant gasped, 2 red mists squirting along his nose. You are a good opponent. You shouldn't fight hard for Tianqi Langjun and let him come out. Jian Wushuang stepped into the void, and said lightly. Mo Luo heard the expression suddenly cloudy. He didn't answer, but looked sideways at the child sitting on his shoulder. Blackbird, what do you do now? The child boy still closed his eyes, and his hoarse voice sounded in Mora's mind. This person is right. We don't need to go to this person for the sake of the Serpent King. Mo Luo hesitated a little, and said, but I promised Tian Snake to solve this person for him. We have done enough for Tian Snake. This. Moro, if I took a shot, then our strength that we managed to recover will come back to the original point again. Think for yourself, I won't stop you. Stop talking. Mo Luo looked up and stared at Jian Wushuang. The Mo Luo tribe always kept their promises and promised things, and never regretted it. Jian Wushuang looked at Mo Luo, sighed and shook his head. Well, I'll do what you want. Jian Wushuang once again lifted the Wu weapon sword, and once again cast a sword to cut stars, and slashed towards Mo Luo. A little cold mang exploded, thousands of silver rainbows condense. Jian Wushuang's whole body power is poured into Wu weapon's Excalibur, and he splits in front of Mo Luo. Roar! Mo Luo opened his mouth and yelled, and also greeted him. Just when Silver Sword Rainbow was about to split on Maruo, the child sitting on his shoulder, trying to open his eyes. The abrupt rises. A huge snake tail shot from the depths of the Temple of Heavenly Serpent. The snake's tail passed directly over the Mo Luo, and slammed at the Silver Sword Rainbow. Click! Immediately, the Silver Sword Rainbow, like glass shattered by an iron whip, cracked open piece by piece. After smashing the Silver Sword Rainbow, this snake tail suddenly pumped back at a faster speed. Jian Wushou stepped back a little step, raised his head and looked in the direction of the snake tail. I saw a demon young man with an inverted triangular face, his hair scattered on his back, and a golden erect pupil, wearing a mopping robe, while vomiting a snake letter, making a heartbreaking fizz sound from the depths of the Temple of the Snake. Tianqi Langjun? Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed, and a flash of glances flashed quickly. And the crowd watching the distance, with the appearance of this demon youth, has long been boiling. It's Lord Tianqi Langjun. Looks, it is Tianqi Langjun who can't hold back anymore. Is he ready to do it himself? We have tens of thousands of years. I haven't seen Lord Tianqi Langjun make a shot. I didn't expect this time to be forced out by this blood sword. Blood sword can force Master Tianqi Langjun to take his own shot. Even if he loses, it is enough to be proud. Many of the ultimate masters in the 8th city began to marvel. And when the ancient masters and others saw the Tianqi Langjun coming out, they immediately lowered their heads. The shadow of a person's famous tree, the 4 words of Tian Snake Langjun, is definitely the most deterrent name in the top 10 cities. At this moment, a few people who were masters of Langu found that when they really saw Tianqi Langjun, they did not even have the courage to face Tianqi Langjun, as if they were afraid of being seen by Tianqi Langjun and knowing that they were coming. He was assaulted and killed. Obviously nothing happened, but the guilty conscience was extremely extreme. Among them, the Maiden of Joshi and the God of Heaven Kang did not evade, and looked at the eyes of King Tianqi Lang, full of resentment. The 2 of them, one was chased and killed by the Celestial King, almost killed, and the other was almost swallowed up by the Celestial King at that time. The fear of the Celestial Lang was long gone, and there was nothing but resentment. Brother Langu, are we really going to kill Tianqi Langjun for Sister Joshi? The leader of Kuang Yi stood behind Lan Jiyu, raised his eyelids secretly, and glanced at the Heavenly Serpent King who came step by step from the depths of the Heavenly Serpent Temple, and swallowed. Lang Jiyu Wenyang, his expression was cloudy and uncertain. In terms of the Jushi Holy Land, except for the Lord of the Holy Land, the Jushi Holy Land is the highest status person in the entire Jushi Holy Land. He is an ancient master of this group of disciples, but if it is true in terms of status, it is almost heaven and earth with the Maiden of 9 Rays. Therefore, if he wants to get a step up in the Holy Land of Joshi, or even fight for the identity of the Lord of the Holy Land in the future, he must rely on the holy goddess of Joshi. Thinking of this, Lan Jiyu bit his teeth, and pretended to be righteous in his face, saying, "Well, what are you afraid of? Isn't there a cannon fodder in front of it?" As he spoke, Lan Jiyu looked up at Xiong Wushuang, and a jealousy flashed in his eyes. He understood that after this battle, no matter whether the Bloodsword was lost or won, the name of the Bloodsword will surely ring through the top 10 cities of the ancient sky and enjoy the limelight. At the same time, he also had to admit that this one called Bloodsword, in terms of strength, I am afraid that he is much stronger than himself. Thinking of the attitude of Zhu Shisheng to Jian Wushuang, the jealousy in his heart became hotter. Tian Kang Shenjun, when this Bloodsword is killed by Tianxi Langjun, we will take a shot, while Tianxi Langjun relaxes, kill him in one fell swoop. Lan Jiyu looked at Tiansang Shenjun and said coldly. Tiansang Shenjun nodded when he heard the words, and looked at Jian Wushuang's eyes, flashing a deep dread. He is not a fool. Through the battle between Jian Wushuang and Mo Luo, he has already seen that Jian Wushuang's combat power is definitely not under him, or even stronger. Unfortunately, this Bloodsword has a good skill. If you join forces with me, the chance of killing Tianxi Langjun will increase. Face alone, I really don't know if he should be arrogant or foolish. Tian Snake Temple outside. Moro, let me do the next thing. Tian Snake Langjun approached step by step, and finally stepped on the void, stood beside Mora, and said, "Okay, Snake, this time I owe you a favor to Mo Luo, and next time you return to the 8 cities, I can help you do one more thing." Mo Luo replied roughly. Immediately, he seemed to think of something again, adding, "If you can return to Hubasheng again." After speaking, Mo Luo took a deep look at Jian Wushuang, and strode away from here. Chapter 42-32. The second is even more. Mo Luo's departure, Jian Wushuang did not stop, but looked at Tianxi Langjun lightly. He could feel that Moro was not in his heyday in the fight with him just now. It seemed that he was injured and had been suppressing his own strength, and sitting on Moro's shoulders, brought him the more threatened moody boy has not yet shot. If it wasn't for this time, Jian Wushuang would not mind letting go of his hands and feet, and the real battle with the name of Mo Luo was in full swing. However, what he wants to kill now is not Mo Luo, but Tianxi Langjun. He and Tianxi Langjun didn't seem to have any Martian flavor, but they already knew that in the 8th city today, only one of them could live. With the tremor of the 8th city, Mo Luo disappeared into the cosmic passage of the 8th city. Outside the gate of the Temple of Heavenly Snake, only Jian Wushuang and Tian Snake Langjun remained. Tianxi Langjun, come and fight directly. Jian Wushuang obliquely held Wu Cry Excalibur, his expression calm. Tian Snake Langjun heard the words, his eyes flashed for a while, and then there was a smile on his face, and he shook his head and said, "No rush, Bloodsword, a delicious meal, only through patient cooking can you becomes delicious." Delicious? Cooking? Jian Wushuang frowned, and asked without expression, "What do you mean?" "Bloodsword, don't you feel it? The pure breath of divine power on your body is really delicious and fascinating." The heavenly serpent prince looked at Xiong Zhenshuang stubbornly, extending his forked tongue, licking the corner of his mouth, countless saliva dripping from his tongue. He closed his eyes, his face intoxicated. The next moment, he opened his eyes suddenly and laughed softly. "So, Bloodsword, I will eat you little by little. Only in this way can I enjoy food." The words fell, and the handsome face of the god of snakes suddenly turned rotten. The corner of his mouth grinned directly to the root of the ear, as if someone had cut his mouth thoroughly from both sides with scissors. The heavenly snake king opened his mouth violently, and the forked tongue, like a javelin, shot out of his mouth, with a venom sufficient to kill the ultimate master, and stabbed towards the sword without a pair of swords. Food. Find death. Jian Mang flashed in the eyes of Jian Wushuang, quickly raised the Wu Weeping Sword, and severely pierced the tongue stabbed by the heavenly serpent king. However, Jian Wushuang's sword was cut, but it was cut. After image? Immediately after, Jian Wushuang felt that a huge force hit him in the chest. Jian's stature receded, and his figure was in the air, drawing a long wave of air. So fast. Jian Wushuang raised his head, His expression was dignified to the extreme. The forked thin tongue retracted like an iron chain. Tien Snake Langjun took the hand, and a smirk evoked in the corner of his mouth, with a strange voice. Bloodsword, come on, I can't wait to give you a reward. Pretend to be a ghost. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were cold, and his right foot was heavily stomped, and his body suddenly blasted out like a cannonball. He turned into a sword and killed him fiercely cut. Jian Wushuang Yijian split, the sharp swordman cut the world. Bloodsword, you are too slow. Tien Snake Langjun just turned his head slightly, and avoided the cut of Jian Wushuang, then his body was distorted for a while, and disappeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Where is it? Jian Wushuang's eyes narrowed, and the divine power suddenly spread out, looking for the position of Tianxi Langjun. Are you looking for me? The cold voice sounded behind Jianwu's ears. Jianwu's eyes flashed with murder, and he didn't look back. He pulled the sword backwards and provoked. Huh! A huge snake tail, like a giant axe, slashed towards the sword Wushuang, colliding with the Wu Weeping sword. The speed of the sword is only one slower, and it will be chopped by this snake tail. Well, the response is good. Tianxi Langjun vomited a spit snake, and his shape was distorted again, disappearing behind Jian Wushuang. The next moment, a snake tail rushed out from under Jianwu's feet, twitched Jian Wushuang's legs fiercely, and pulled down hard. Huh! Immediately, Jian Wushuang was caught in the tail of the snake, dropped from the void, and smashed into a loft in the 8th city that had been turned into ruins. Countless fumes filled the sky, the golden light flashed in the eyes of the heavenly serpent god, penetrated directly through the nothingness, and his footsteps once again shot toward the attic. Huh! Huh! Immediately, in the smoke-filled ruins, there was a rushing battle between Jian Wushuang and Tian Shilang. Did you notice that the blood sword was suppressed? The celestial snakes dominate the universe at speed. Although the blood sword's attack power is strong, it will not help if you can't meet the celestial snake king. Master Tianxi Langjun is too fast. In the distance, numerous 8th city monks who watched the battle whispered. As the masters who can reach the 8th city, their eyesight is naturally not weak. Just a few battles between Jian Wushuang and Tianxi Langjun, they will see it. If it comes to attack power, Jian Wushuang's attack power, not under Heavenly Snake King. Where the disciples of Joshi Holy Land and the God of Heaven Kang live. Langu, I don't think this blood sword will last for a long time. We are ready to shoot at any time. Tiansang Shenjun stared closely at the two fighting swordsmen and Tien Snake Langjun in the smoke and said with a deep voice. Already prepared. The master of Langu nodded, and in his hand, a snow-white spear suddenly appeared. Call out. A snake tail shot violently, and the sword unparalleled quickly pulled the sword and split it. It's too fast. Jian Wushuang's face was gloomy, his eyes constantly looked around, and he could only passively resist the huge snake tail that was constantly shooting from the void. He has exploded 10 times the willpower given to him by the laws of the universe, but even so, let alone fight with the Serpent King, it is extremely difficult to capture the figure of the Serpent King things. Even if he can occasionally see the figure of Tien Snake Langjun, after the fierce sword splits down, the trace of Tien Snake Langjun has already disappeared in place. The feeling of punching on the cotton really made sword unparalleled disgusting. Hissing, the hissing sound of Tien Snake Langjun's letter continued to come from all directions, and then, a cold and groaning sound sounded. Blood sword, give up struggling, I will reward you well. I will crush your bones little by little, drain your soul little by little, and then burn your soul on the fire of God thousands of years. What do you say about this reward? Along with this sentence, the figure of the heavenly snake god king constantly shuttled in the void around Jian Wushuang. Noise. Jian Wushuang ran a sword at his fingertips, split the tail of the snake, and took a deep breath, and said to himself, I can't go on like this, otherwise I'll be dead here. After that, Jian Wushuang flashed in his eyes, and made a decision instantly. Talented, supernatural. Chapter 42-33. Third more. After the words fell, a tremendous mysterious power came to the audience. I saw that within the 100 square feet of Jian Wushuang, it suddenly turned into a dark area. The primitive universe is extremely repressive. As long as it is in the realm of the primitive universe, Jian Wushuang's strength will be increased by a large arc, and the strength of the opponent will be weakened by a large arc. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang looked up and saw Tian Snake Lang Jun, standing not far from his right side, and quickly moved away. Got you. Jian Wushuang sneered, and stepped on his right foot, killing Tianxi Langjun. Call out. Open the sky. A half-moon blood-colored swordmang split out instantly and landed heavily on Tianxi Langjun. Tian Snake Langjun did not expect that Jian Wushuang could capture his position. The sword was slanted directly on his shoulder, pulling a deep mouth. Can you see me? Tianxi Langjun's cold smile disappeared, and he frowned. Snake, go to death. A sound of indifference blew, and the sword unparalleled was killed again with a sword. A huge sword mantle locked him instantly, containing strong laws of the universe, and slashed at him fiercely. Tian Snake Lang looked at the huge sword, and once again twitched a corner of his mouth, sighing softly. The prey has begun to resist. A trident suddenly appeared in the hands of Tianxi Langjun. Tian Snake Langjun flipped his right hand, and also cut out a halberd with rich cosmic rules, and blasted towards the sword Wushuang. The halberd and sword collided, and at the intersection of the two, a huge arc shock wave exploded, spreading around. Jian Wushuang and Tian Snake Langjun quickly fought hundreds of trick. In the original universe of talented supernatural powers, the speed of Jian Wushuang and Tian Snake Langjun is at the same level. The magic power of the sword unparalleled far surpasses the heavenly Snake Langjun. The situation reversed instantly. Disgusting little bug. The sword Wushuang sneered and laughed. The Wu-crying Excalibur in his hand continued to chop out thousands of sharp swords, like a bomb, and blasted away towards the Tianxi Langjun. Mystery, swallow the sun. Tian Snake Langjun faced these thousands of sharp sword chi. His face couldn't help but hesitated, and opened his mouth suddenly, biting hard at these hundreds of sword chi. Boom! I saw with the Snake King opened his mouth. Behind him, suddenly appeared a shadow of a giant snake covering the sky. This giant snake opened its huge mouth, exposed its fangs, bite it hard, and swallowed all the swords into its mouth. Immediately afterwards, this is not over yet. The serpent ghost opened his mouth again, biting hard at the sword unparalleled. Chopper star. Jian Wushuang sneered, and the Wu weeping sword suddenly turned into a silver sword rainbow, splitting in the shadow of this giant snake. With a blast, the shadow of the serpent collapsed. Jian Wushuang leapt along, with 5 fingers reaching out, grabbing Tian Snake Langjun's head. Now, who is the prey? Jian Wushuang sneered, and more than 12,000 times the divine power in his body poured into his right hand, grabbing Tian Snake Langjun's head, and pressing it the ground. A huge pit suddenly appeared on the ground. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, grasped Tian Snake Langjun's head, and moved towards the wall, leaving fiercely. Jian Wu flew under his feet, grasping Tian Snake Langjun's head, pushing all the way across, smashing hundreds of walls one after another. Fengru's sharp sword entwined between the 5 fingers of the sword unparalleled, constantly exploding on the head of Tianxi Langjun. Poor little bug. Jian Wushuang sneered, throwing his right hand fiercely, smashing the heavenly Snake King into a small lake in the 8th city. Suddenly, countless people were stunned. Everyone did not expect that the situation would reverse so quickly, that soon they had not responded, and Tianxi Langjun was crushed by the sword Wushuang. The realm of the primitive universe gradually dissipated. The sword holds Wu-cry Excalibur without hands and walks towards the small lake step by step. Wow! At that moment, the water in the small lake capsized and the raging waves rushed to the scene. A dark python swept up from the small lake and opened his mouth to scream. Blood sword, I have decided. I will not only crush your body inch by inch, but I will also slaughter your entire family and kill all your close ones in the world. This python stared at Jian Wushuang. His eyes were so cold that he uttered words. Next moment, Tian Snake Lang, who turned into a body, rushed violently, rushing out of the lake, and flew towards Jian Wushuang. Poppy poppy. Beside his huge snake, there was an explosion that broke the sound barrier. After turning into the ontology, He was faster than 10 times faster. Jian Wushuang just felt a flower in front of him, and felt an extremely sickly smell. A huge mouth, biting him hard and swallowing him. No. The blood sword is going to be swallowed up by the king of the snake. It is said that in the stomach of the celestial snakes, there is a small world of their own. Even if the star galaxy is swallowed by the celestial snakes, they will be quickly corroded and digested. If the blood sword is swallowed by the heavenly serpent king, there is absolutely no chance of survival. Both of them are too strong. This is the first time I have seen the appearance of the Tianqi family. In the distance, the 8th city dominated by countless battles, his eyes flashed wildly. The master of Hao Ember and the maiden of Joshi immediately clenched their fists and looked at this scene hardly. The giant snake's mouth was extremely stinky, and the sword Wushuang Wu weeping sword propped up, blocking the snake's mouth to close. An icy air continued to come from the depths of Tianqi Langjun's body. Jian Wushuang knew that even if his own body was strong, once he was swallowed by Tianqi Langjun, there would be no possibility of survival. Roar, roar, roar. Tianqi Langjun growled madly, and sword Wushuang was pinched in his mouth, but the Wu Cry Excalibur holding his upper jaw was unable to bite him. Blood sword, I see how long you can stick to it. Tianqi Langjun's indifferent voice sounded in Jian Wushuang's mind. Immediately, a drop of venom sufficient to kill the ultimate master, followed his fangs, dripped on Wu weapon sword. Suddenly, Wu weapon sword, dripped by the venom, uttered a burning. I saw the spot where the venom dripped at the blade of Wu weapon's Excalibur, and dark patches the size of fingernails suddenly appeared, burning black poisonous smoke. Jian Wushuang saw a sinking in his heart. I am afraid that under this venom www.mtl novel. Rao is the Wu crying Excalibur who has now reached the power of the ultimate limit of the law, and cannot hold it for long. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang's expression returned to calmness, and he said, "The talent is amazing, the life is shocking." Cut the star, boom. Instantly, countless forces surged on Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's whole cards were no longer reserved. Except for Tai Luo Excalibur and Yong Yi, he had used all his strength. Today, I give the world a look at the blood sword and snake. Chapter 42-34. The first is more. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's momentum was extremely powerful. A coercion from the depths of the soul came suddenly. This is the power of life deterrence. In an instant, time seemed to be fixed, everything began to slow down, as if sinking into a mire swamp. Under this power, Tianqi Langjun actually felt that he was extremely small, and there was a feeling that he wanted to worship. This is from the higher life, overlooking the lower life. This is from the super-perfect life, from the blood of the soul, the comprehensive suppression of lower life. Jian Wushuang took advantage of this short dullness, and suddenly blasted out from the mouth of Qianlang Langjun, and then Wu Wei Shenjian fiercely chopped off. Chopper star. Huh. Suddenly, Baizhong Zhenhong in the sword without hands condensed, like heaven came, with black hair flying all over. Baizhong Silver Zhenhong was splitting towards Tianqi Langjun. Click. Click. At this moment, the void became trembling because of this sword, and made an overwhelming clicking sound. Suddenly, the silver sword rainbow fell, and the body of the swallowing python which was transformed into a snake by the heavenly snake prince directly opened a deep mouth. Roar. Tian Snake Langjun screamed extremely loudly in his mouth. Countless blood spread from his snake, spilled on the ground, and directly burned numerous pits. Under this sword, countless divine powers of Tianqi Langjun were annihilated, and the sharp sword's meaning continued to hang in his body, killing the divine power in him. Roar, roar. The heavenly snake god trembled madly on the ground because of severe pain. The huge snake tail, the whole 8th city that slaps, shakes for a while. At this moment, countless monks in the 8th city watching the war were shocked to the extreme. 10 Serpent King lost? Slaughter. Snake snake. Sky Snake Langjun really would die in the hands of Bloodsword. Something is happening. Something is coming up. Invincible. This Bloodsword is invincible. Who can stop the sword? Countless people looked at this scene, with a startle on their faces, and then shouted in disbelief. The masters of Lan Jiyu, etc., also flashed incredible faces for a moment. This blood sword really defeated Tianxi Langjun? There was a flash of disbelief in Gus' eyes. Behind him, those disciples of the Joshi Holy Land have already been scared and almost glared. Tian Kang Shenjin's eyes flashed constantly, looking at Jian Wushuang's eyes, full of fear. But after taking a deep breath, he calmed down quickly. In his expectation, Jian Wushuang should have been killed by Tianxi Langjun, and then when Tianxi Langjun relaxed his vigilance, he killed them in one fell swoop, and then killed in one blow. But now, although the expectation is different, the effect is not different. Langu is now, it's time we shot. Tiansong Shenjun flashed a flash of cold mang in his eyes and turned back and drank. Immediately, Tiansong Shenjun stepped hard, his body soared into the sky, and blasted towards Tianxi Langjun. The thoughts in Lan Gus' eyes flashed quickly, and he glanced at the sword unparalleled, sneer, blood sword, you are really strong, but I took the skull of Tian Snake Langjun, call out. He was holding a snow-white sharpshooter, and he was just as quickly swept away. Sister Joshi, you are optimistic, how did I break off the head of Tianxi Langjun? He glanced at Joshi's sister and looked proudly. Next moment, Tiansong Shenjun and Langu dominated the two, and hesitated at the same time towards Tianxi Langjun. Ten Snake, you will be guilty of multiple injustices, you see who I am? Tiansong God laughed loudly, and the blue sword appeared in his hand, and the thunder rolled on it, splitting towards Tian Snake Langjun. Tianxi Langjun, you remember, the ancient who killed you is also Langu. The ancient master laughed aloud, with a flash of his body, and combined with the snow-white sharp gun in his hand, pierced the head of Tianxi Langjun. This change came too fast. As soon as Jian Wushuang did not respond. When Jian Wushuang reacted, Tiansong Shenjun and Lan Jiyu dominated the two, and passed him, forcing Tianxlang. Idiot! Jian Wushuang's face suddenly gloomy to the extreme. Now Tianxi Langjun is in an extremely dangerous stage, and even he intends to avoid the sharp edge. The two men are now rushing up. Is it true that the Serpent King will die on that day? Lying on the ground, the snake king of god blood constantly pouring out of the snake's mouth, raised his head, and slowly looked at the two princes Tian Kang God King and Langu dominated. The golden vertical pupil in his eyes suddenly burst out. Stock happy. Before waiting for Tiansong Shenjun and Lan Jiyu to come near him, his huge snake tail volleyed out, wrapped around Tiansong Shenjun's body, and pulled at him fiercely. Tiansong Shenjun's face changed greatly. He only felt that after being caught by the snake tail, his divine power could not be evaporated at all. The thunder rolling on the sword in his hand exploded on the snake tail, which could only explode the black mark. How is that possible? God Tiansong horrified. Seeing this scene, the master of Lan Jiyu suddenly turned wild and panicked. He looked at the constantly struggling king god of heaven, only to feel that his body was shaking with fear. Escape. As soon as the ancient masters stepped on, they suddenly left. Haven't waited for him to take 2 steps. A bifurcated tongue shot out of Tianxi Langjun's mouth in an instant, and he caught the master of Langu, and pulled back towards Tianxi Shenjun. Do not. Lan Jiyu dominated and shouted. However, it was useless at all. If Tian Snake Langjun did not encounter Jian Wushuang, it is definitely the most terrifying existence among the top 10 cities in the ancient sky. How can he resist? Suddenly, Lord Langu was swallowed into the mouth by Tian Serangjun, and his huge sharp fangs pierced his neck fiercely. The ancient god's magical power was constantly sucked away by the king of snakes. The master of Langu struggled frantically, however, only a few moments later, the master of Langu gradually disappeared. The hands and feet hang down softly, and finally the deities turn into powder. The injury on Tianxi Langjun was quickly recovered by the speed of the naked eye, which was destroyed by the sword. The 8th city monk who watched the battle from a distance saw the scene and shook his head without any mercy. This man is really stupid to the extreme. Well, who is Tianxi Langjun? Do you think anyone can step on his head? Does this person think he is a blood sword? Can Tianxi Langjun provoke him? It really deserves it. It's not enough to fail. The masters of these spectators watched, while looking at the people in Joshi Holy Land, full of irony. The next moment, they sighed. Chapter 42-35 Snake Slaying, Part 6, Bang. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely mysterious force descended on the scene. The area within 1,000 feet of Jian Wushuang suddenly turned into a pitch-black domain. The original universe had a strong suppressive power. As long as Jian Wushuang was within the domain of the original universe, his power would increase by a large margin while his opponent's power would be greatly weakened. Immediately, Jian Wushuang looked up and saw Heavenly Snake Playboy standing not far to his right. He quickly moved to the side. "I've found you." Jian Wushuang sneered, stepped with his right foot, and rushed toward Heavenly Snake Playboy. Whoosh! Split open the sky. A half-moon-shaped blood-red sword light struck out instantly and landed on Heavenly Snake Playboy. Woo-woo-oo-woo. Heavenly Snake Playboy did not expect that Jian Wushuang would be able to capture his position. The sword directly cut his shoulder, leaving a deep cut. "Hey! You can see me now?" The cold smile on Heavenly Snake Playboy's face disappeared, and he frowned. "Heavenly Snake, go to hell." A cold voice was heard and Jian Wushuang charged again with his sword. Clang! A huge sword light instantly locked onto him, containing rich universe laws, and slashed at him ruthlessly. Looking at the huge sword light, Heavenly Snake Playboy's mouth pulled up into a strange smile again. He sighed and said, "The prey is starting to resist." A trident appeared in Heavenly Snake Playboy's hand. Heavenly Snake Playboy turned his right hand and also slashed out a halberd light containing rich universe principles toward Jian Wushuang. Bang! The trident radiance and the sword radiance collided. At the point of contact, a huge circular shockwave exploded and spread out in all directions. Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy quickly exchanged thousands of moves. With the help of the original universe, Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy's speed finally reached the same level. Jian Wushuang's divine power was far stronger than Heavenly Snake Playboy's. The situation was reversed in an instant. "Disgusting little bug." Jian Wushuang sneered in a low voice. The Wuqi divine sword in his hand continuously slashed out thousands of sharp sword qi, which bombarded Heavenly Snake Playboy like bombs. Secret skill, Sun Devouring. Facing the thousands of sharp sword qi, Heavenly Snake Playboy's face turned cold. He opened his mouth and bit at the thousands of sword qi. Boom! As Heavenly Snake Playboy opened his mouth, a huge phantom of a snake appeared behind him. The phantom of the giant snake opened its mouth and bared its fangs. With a fierce bite, it swallowed all the sword qi. Then, the giant snake phantom opened its mouth again and bit Jian Wushuang. Sundering stars. Jian Wushuang sneered and the Wuqi divine sword immediately turned into a silver sword rainbow and slashed at the giant snake phantom. Bang! With an explosive sound, the giant snake phantom collapsed. Jian Wushuang followed him with a leap. He stretched out his 5 fingers and grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head. "Now, who is the prey?" Jian Wushuang sneered and poured all the divine power that was 12,000 times more than his divine body into his right hand. He grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head and pressed it to the ground. Bang! A huge pit appeared in the ground. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head, and pushed him toward a wall. Boom! 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 Jian Wushuang grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head and pushed him forward, breaking hundreds of walls. The sharp sword essence wrapped around Jian Wushuang's fingers and exploded on Heavenly Snake Playboy's head. "Poor little bug." Jian Wushuang sneered and threw ruler Heavenly Snake into a small lake in the 8th city with his right hand. Countless people were dumbfounded. No one had expected that the situation would be reversed so quickly. It was so fast that before they could react, Heavenly Snake Playboy had been crushed by Jian Wushuang. The domain formed by the original universe gradually dissipated. Jian Wushuang held the Wuqi divine sword in his hand and walked toward the lake step by step. Whoosh! At this moment, the water in the small lake was overturned, and turbulent waves rose up. A huge black python suddenly swept out of the small lake and opened its mouth to roar. "Blood sword, I've decided. Not only will I crush your divine body inch by inch, but he'll also slaughter your entire clan and kill all the people close to you in this world. The giant python stared at Jian Wushuang with an extremely cold gaze and spoke in the human language. The next moment, Heavenly Snake Playboy, who had transformed into his original body, suddenly rushed out of the lake and rushed toward Jian Wushuang. Pa 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 pa. A sound barrier-breaking explosion burst out beside his huge snake. His speed was more than 10 times faster now that he had returned to his original form. Jian Wushuang's vision blurred for a moment and he felt an extremely disgusting stench coming at him. It opened its huge mouth and bit him ruthlessly, swallowing him. Not good. The blood sword is going to be swallowed by Heavenly Snake Playboy. Legend has it that the stomach of the Heavenly Snake tribe is a small world of its own. Even the stars and the galaxy will be rapidly corroded and digested after being swallowed by the Heavenly Snake tribe. If the blood sword is swallowed by Heavenly Snake Playboy, there's no possibility of him surviving. The two of them are too strong. This is the first time I've seen the true form of the Heavenly Snake tribe. In the distance, countless rulers of the 8th city, who were watching the battle, had their eyes flashing wildly. As for ruler Hao Jin and holy maiden Joshi, they clenched their fists tightly and did not even dare to breathe loudly as they watched this scene. The snake's mouth reeked of blood. Jian Wushuang raised his Wuqi divine sword and blocked the snake's mouth that was closing. Waves of cold yin qi came from deep inside Heavenly Snake Playboy's body. Jian Wushuang knew that no matter how strong his divine body was, he would not be able to survive once Heavenly Snake Playboy swallowed him. Roar! Heavenly Snake Playboy roared madly. Jian Wushuang was in his mouth, but he could not bite the Wuqi divine sword that was supporting his upper jaw. Blood sword, let's see how long you can last. Heavenly Snake Playboy's cold voice rang in Jian Wushuang's mind. And then, drops of venom, enough to kill an ultimate ruler, flowed through his fangs and onto the Wuqi divine sword. Immediately, the Wuqi divine sword, which was dripping with venom, let out a sizzling sound as it was burned. Black spots the size of fingernails appeared on the Wuqi divine sword where the poison had dripped, and black poisonous smoke rose. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's heart sank. He was afraid that even the Wuqi divine sword, which had reached the limit of a principal's cardinal treasure, would not be able to last long under the poison. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang's expression became calm again. He said word by word, innate divine ability, life intimidation, /*, boom. In an instant, countless forces surged around Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Jian Wushuang did not hold back any of his trump cards. Except for the Tarot Divine Sword and Eternal Night, he used all of his strength. Today, I, Blood Sword, will show the world what I'm capable of. Chapter 42-36. The first is more. You, get out. Jian Wushuang faintly glanced at the maiden of Joshi and said. Saint Joshi opened her mouth and wanted to say something. In the end, she turned into a sigh, and retreated silently to one side. Suddenly, the group of disciples of Joshi Holy Land, who stood behind the Joshi Madam, looked like lavish, mountain hunting, and so on. They all looked aside and asked, Blood Sword, what do you want? Blood Sword, don't go too far, we are disciples in Joshi Holy Land. Blood Sword snapped. Without waiting for them to finish, Jian Wushuang directly raised his palm and slapped it. This slap did not show any divine power, but it was drawn unobstructed on the faces of the deserted master and others. I killed all the Snake Kings, and still care about your Joshi Holy Land. Jian Wushuang said coldly. Suddenly, the masters of Kuang-yi and others were all angry, but they were afraid to speak, but they could only cover their cheeks, lower their heads, and dare not look at Zhenshou again. Jian Wushuang's one-handed kill of Tianxi Langjun was really fierce and mighty. They had already been scared of courage. The previous question was nothing more than a slap. When Jian Wushuang's slap was drawn, they even avoided the basics. None of it. Idiot. Finally, Jian Wushuang gave them a cold look and turned to leave. Where would the disciples of Joshi Holy Land make their own claims? Where would he use the divine body? How Emperor immediately followed Jian Wu's body. Before leaving, he glanced at the Joshi Holy Land severely, and hummed, I tell you, Lord Bloodsword is broad-minded, and only slap you. It's okay, but Ember, but I will see you in the Shinkong Gulu in the future, otherwise I will see one kill one. Having said that, he quickly followed the pace of Jian Wushuang and walked away. After the sword Wushuang left, the dead crowd began to boil. Blood sword palm kills Qianshi Langjun, tops the 8th city. God manifested, the world was shocked. Blood sword proved invincible. The blood snake slayer Langjun killed the first person in the top 10 cities of Dingxing Ancient Road. In an instant, the battle between Jian Wushuang and Qianshi Langjun passed like a hurricane. It not only spread to the 8th city, but also spread at a very fast speed towards other starry sky ancient roads and other caves in Tianchengqi world. 7th city, 6th city, 5th city. Even the 9th and 10th cities behind the 8th city. The word bloodsword is completely famous for the ancient road of starry sky. For a while, the word bloodsword stood out, and among the top 10 cities in the ancient sky, all discussed the battle between the bloodsword and the heavenly snake king. Some people say that Jian Wushuang is the top sun in the universe, and he can't go to the ancient road of the sky. Others say that Jian Wushuang is the son of a top supreme. For a time, the discussion about sword warriors filled the entire top 10 cities of Shinkong Ancient Road, but there were thousands of faces. Naturally, the stories that came out of them also gave birth to countless versions. However, when a message came from the extremely distant first city, the entire top 10 cities of Shinkong Ancient Road shook. The blood sword that slayed Qianshi Langjun, only the 5th level dominates the repair. Countless people can't believe that they can cut and kill the blood sword of the invincible ultimate dominator Qianshi Langjun, only the 5th level dominates the repair. Evil. Inferior level evil. Blood sword is only the 5th level master dominance, and it will be able to kill the invincible ultimate dominator level. If the blood sword reaches the ultimate dominator level, as long as it is not in the universe, who can heal him? I'm afraid those evil spirits deep in the ancient starry sky, aren't they? Blood sword will definitely become one of the new giants in the ancient sky. If they knew that Jian Wushuang was stunned when they killed Qianshi Langjun, now they are shocked. Countless people are crazy. The outside world changed like a vortex, and the sword unparalleled which caused all this happened, now sitting cross-legged on a mountain in the 8th city. The evening breeze, starry, Jian Wushuang in a black robe, sitting cross-legged, on him, countless divine power around, nourishing his body. His exhausted divine power is rapidly recovering. After a moment, Jian Wushuang slowly spit out the turbid air at the exit, opened his eyes, and a glance of Shunmong flashed in his eyes. Finally recovered. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. After beheading Qianshi Langjun, he did not rush to leave the 8th city, but looked for a mountain outside the 8th city to restore his spirit. After decades of recuperation and rest, his exhausted divine power was finally completely restored. And sword unparalleled, after his own battle, after the battle of Qianshi Langjun, he finally had a clear positioning. Today I, with all the means at my disposal, have been able to slay the invincible ultimate master, but the cost will be great. Jian Wushuang murmured to himself. The means he said are all out, and naturally does not include the sword of Yongyi and the Taro Excalibur. You know, when he was dominated at the 4th level, he killed the 3 princes of Dafeng God Kingdom and the South King of Dajin God Kingdom with the sword of Eternal Night. Although the Qianshi Langjun is strong, he is not much stronger than the original 3 princes and King Zhennan. If Jian Wushuang directly urged Yongyi a sword, it would be enough to kill Qianshi Langjun instantly. Even in the face of the King of 9 robbers, Jian Wushuang had the confidence to fight. The original intention of Shinkong Gulu. Yongyi is a powerful sword, but it's the kendo of others, Taro Supreme's kendo, not his unparalleled kendo. If he relies on the sword of Eternal Night in everything, then even if he is strong in the future, he will only be a shadow living under the Supreme Lord Taro. Taro Supreme, known as the first person in kendo since the ages, has been named Kendo Supreme, and no one has broken his legend so far. Numerous kendo masters have followed him in kendo tough effort and countless years of researching Taro Supreme kendo. However, the result is that they can never surpass Taro Supreme in their lifetime. This is not what Jian Wushuang wanted. If Jen Wushuang wants to surpass Tai Luo Supreme in the future, then the only way is to continue to grow his strength and open up a truly invincible kendo that belongs to Jen Wushuang himself. In this regard, Jen Wushuang saw very thoroughly. After all, the strength is still weaker. Jen Wushuang sighed gently and looked down at the 8th city. I saw the 8th city, which was blasted into ruins by him and Tianxi Langjun. In these decades, the city has gradually returned to normal. This made Jen Wushuang have to say with emotion again, "What great power that the master who opened up the ancient road of the sky has the world's power." Thinking of this, Jen Wushuang looked up at Wudi Shinkong. Chapter 42-37 Snake Slaying, Part 8, It's a Pity for the Blood Sword. It took me so much effort to severely injure Heavenly Snake Playboy and kill him. But now, because of this idiot, Heavenly Snake Playboy has recovered. The blood sword is in danger. The spectators looked at Jen Wushuang and shook their heads with a sigh. Joshi Holy Land, Hao Jin, won't rest until you're dead. Die. Ruler Hao Jin's eyes almost popped out of his head as he charged toward the Joshi disciples. On the other side, Heavenly Snake Playboy's snake tail swung again and he swallowed Divine Lord Tianzang. In an instant, the huge wound on Heavenly Snake Playboy's body that was cut by Jen Wushuang's star-slashing sword Rainbow began to recover. In just a few breaths, it was completely healed. Hiss hiss hiss, Heavenly Snake Playboy slowly raised his head and let out a cold smile. Blood sword, it seems like even the heavens don't want me to die. He looked at Jen Wushuang and said sarcastically. Hearing this, Jen Wushuang's eyes were cold and he replied indifferently, "If I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time." Is that so? Heavenly Snake Playboy chuckled without a care. The next moment, blood sword, you should die. His face suddenly became distorted and his huge golden vertical pupils were filled with ruthlessness and madness. He bounced up from the ground again and shot toward Jen Wushuang. You're the one who should die. Jen Wushuang snorted coldly with an expressionless face. He lowered his head to look at the black spot on the Wuchi divine sword that had been scalded by the venom. With a flip of his right hand, he put the Wuchi divine sword back into his interspatial ring. After doing all this, Jen Wushuang took a deep breath and his expression became calm. He closed his eyes and slowly said, "Divine body, appear." In an instant, Jen Wushuang's body emitted a sound similar to frying beans. A wave of energy that came from the deepest part of his soul and the deepest part of his perfect life form began to gush out. Under this power, his divine body started to grow. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 10,000 miles, 30,000 miles, 60,000 miles, at this moment. Everyone's face froze and their eyes widened in disbelief. An unimaginable giant, tens of thousands of miles tall and surrounded by endless immortal radiance, appeared in front of Heavenly Snake Playboy. His face was surrounded by chaos, only revealing a trace of his appearance. He looked exactly the same as Jen Wushuang. His power was indescribable and powerful beyond comprehension. It was as if he could break the universe with a raise of his hand and destroy the earth with a step. Heavenly Snake Playboy, who was originally huge, was like an ant under the feet of the giant. Under countless shocked gazes, Jen Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. 2 bolts of lightning flashed across his eyes. Other than having divine power and a soul that far surpassed cultivators of the same realm, special creatures also had a divine body at its strongest state. This was the first time Jen Wushuang had revealed his divine body to the world. The entire 8th city was shocked. What is this? Heavenly Snake Playboy's speed came to a sudden halt. He raised his head and looked at the giant surrounded by countless immortal light, and his golden vertical pupils shrank. A cold chi rushed to his head. For the first time, Heavenly Snake Playboy felt fear in his heart. Retreat. Heavenly Snake Playboy's eyes flickered. He was uncertain about the giant who had transformed into Jen Wushuang's divine body. He immediately made a decision to avoid the sharp edge first. In an instant, Heavenly Snake Playboy was about to shoot into the distance. Looking at Heavenly Snake Playboy who was far away, Jen Wushuang's expression did not change at all and he spoke calmly. suppress. In an instant, Jian Wushuang was like a god who controlled the life and death of the world and set the law. An indescribable divine power gathered in Jian Wushuang's giant hand and pressed down on Heavenly Snake Playboy. Boom. No words could describe the horror of this palm. The entire world was covered by a giant palm. There was no light, no earth, and no sky. Under this palm, Heavenly Snake Playboy seemed to have turned into a small snake that was at the mercy of others and was suppressed by Jian Wushuang's hand. Roar, roar, roar. Heavenly Snake Playboy screamed and howled. However, no matter how he struggled, he could not move at all, as if he was being pressed down by a million mountains. The sharp and fierce sword essence was activated by Jian Wushuang. It exploded between his 5 fingers and bombarded Heavenly Snake Playboy continuously. Boom, boom, boom. Heavenly Snake Playboy's snake body kept exploding, condensing, and exploding again. This process was repeated thousands of times. As Heavenly Snake Playboy let out a shrill roar, everyone was shocked to see this scene. They felt a chill down their spine as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. This is too terrifying. Countless people's lips trembled as they spoke. After a while, when Jian Wushuang raised his palm again, it had already turned into nothingness. Heavenly Snake Playboy had been completely annihilated. Catcher, catcher, catcher. Jian Wushuang's 68,000-mile-long divine body gradually shrank and returned to normal after a while. At that moment, the entire 8th city fell into a deathly silence. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. No one was discussing it, and no one made a sound. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Jian Wushuang and they were all shocked. Until now, their minds were still filled with Jian Wushuang's indomitable and 68,000-mile divine body. The same thought appeared in their minds at the same time. I want to compete with the heavens. After returning to his normal form, Jian Wushuang's aura was extremely weak and he almost fell from the sky. The price of using the divine body once is too great. Jian Wushuang laughed bitterly. Outsiders only thought that he had killed Heavenly Snake Playboy with a flip of his hand. Only he knew how much he had paid. At this moment, his divine power was almost completely exhausted, and his entire body was in pain as if it had been stabbed by needles. His divine body was on the verge of exploding. But it's good, it's not like I didn't gain anything. Jian Wushuang smiled and turned his head to look at the place where Heavenly Snake Playboy had died. He saw 2 sharp fangs and an interspatial ring floating in the air. Drops of pitch-black venom dripped down the fangs, corroding the ground and creating huge pits. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and took the 2 poisonous fangs and Heavenly Snake Playboy's interspatial ring. Then, Jian Wushuang took out a few divine herbs from his interspatial ring that could quickly replenish divine power. He sat down cross-legged to recover his divine power. Each of these divine herbs was extremely precious. However, to Jian Wushuang, who had obtained the complete treasures of the Taro ruins, they were nothing. When his divine power had recovered slightly, Jian Wushuang stood up and walked toward the crowd. In an instant, everyone automatically made way for him and looked at Jian Wushuang with extreme respect. Jian Wushuang walked past them slowly and finally stopped in front of the Joshi Holy Land disciples. It was time to settle some scores. Sir Bloodsword. Joshi had a complicated expression on her face as she called out softly. Chapter 42-38. The first is more. Inside the Taishu temple, the black minaret stood like a sword, and the thunder rolled above the sky. The 7 temple masters of the Taishu temple all stood respectfully under the minaret, bowed their hands and looked solemn. Rumble tilde. A thunder suddenly exploded in the sky. I saw a middle-aged man wearing a royal uniform among Wanzhang Leiguang stepping down from the air. This middle-aged man is simply the pioneer of the Taishu temple, the Taishu emperor. See Lord God. The 7 main hall masters knelt on the ground, and spoke at the same time. The middle-aged man was bathed in thunder light, surrounded by thunder snakes, nodded indifferently, and said, "Get up." Yes. 7 masters stood up. This time I return, there are 2 things to say. Emperor Taishu stood on his back and said lightly. The 7 temple masters all said nothing, and quietly listened to the Emperor Taishu. In time, I will no longer serve as the Emperor of the Taishu Temple, but I have already selected the person in charge of the Emperor. I have already chosen it. Taishu Emperor calmly said. When this remark came to an end, all the masters of the 7 palaces were all uproar. Master God, this is absolutely impossible. Immediately, among the masters of the 7 palaces, several temple masters stepped out and said quickly, "When will it be settled by others?" Emperor Taishu glanced at them lightly. Suddenly, the hall masters were shocked and did not dare to say more, but just thought more about the heart. However, without waiting for them to think about it, Emperor Taishu continued to say, "After I left, the first temple owner, Bingyu, was responsible for serving as Taishu Emperor. Dominion, do you understand?" The words fell, and the main leaders of the 7 temples of the Taishu Temple all looked at the Lord of the Bingao Temple with complex eyes. The Lord of the Bingyu Palace heard that his expression did not change much, but he arched his hand. "The Emperor of God is assured that I must manage the Taishu Temple well and do not take care of it." The Emperor Taishu nodded slightly when he heard the words, and then the words turned, and continued, "The second thing is to lift the seal suppression of the prisoner dragon and let him dominate the ancient road of Shinkong." What? That lunatic is about to be released. This lunatic is released, I don't know if it is good or bad. The masters of the 7 halls of the temple all frowned, but they also knew that with the fall of the Qingshu, they were 2 temples. If they want to get a seat in the ancient road that dominates the sky, then they can only release the prisoner dragon. Come out and go to dominate the ancient road of Shinkong. Emperor Taixus' eyes flashed, and then he turned to look at the black spire behind him. I saw him waving his hand, and the black iron gate of the black spire behind it opened slowly. Inside the gate, there was endless darkness, and a stale dust accompanied by the yin wind rolled out of the door. Immediately afterwards, I heard a heavy gasp, coming from inside the iron gate, as if there were some monsters about to break out. There was a sound of iron chains rubbing against the floor. After a while, a waist-riding monster was seen, and gradually emerged from the darkness in the minaret. The monster had blue skin on his body, a row of barbs on his back, and dark black iron shackles on both hands and feet. Taste of freedom. The monster raised his head and sighed, and slowly opened his eyes. I saw that there were only white eyes and no eyes in his eyes. He looked sideways at the Lord of the 7 palaces, with a smirk in his mouth, and said, 7 lords, 10 chaos times, long time no see. The 7 palace masters heard the words and snorted expressionlessly. The monster wanted to talk again, and when he saw Emperor Taishu, he said lightly, "Prison dragon, let you out this time, there is something for you to do." "Hey, I guessed a long time ago, you must have something to do with me." The prison dragon heard a smile, and then pouted, "I senti this your usual way of doing things, just let me go when you need it. Come out and wait for me to use up, then suppress my seal." Emperor Taishu frowned when he heard the words, and said indifferently, "After you have done this well, I can truly set you free." Oh! Prison dragon's pupils shrank, and a look of suspicion flashed in his eyes. "God Emperor, are you serious?" "I talked, when did I lie to you?" Tai Shuxian replied lightly. "Okay." Prison dragon turned his eyes, and then Feng Feng said, "God, please, what do I need this time? I let you out this time, on behalf of Taishu Shenzong, to go to dominate the last city of Shinkong Ancient Road, and compete for the grand event of the universe." Emperor Taishu said, "Dominate the Shinkong Ancient Road? Just dominate?" Prison dragon sneered at hearing the words, and there was a brutal cruelty in his eyes. With the right hand of Emperor Taishu, the shackles on prison dragon disappeared. Suddenly, a breathtaking atmosphere, centered on the prison dragon, skyrocketed. Prison dragon slowly straightened his waist, twisted his neck and made a clicking noise. It didn't take long for Emperor Taishu to leave Taishu Star Domain. And just when the prisoner was going to go to the ancient road to the starry sky, Bingyu supremely stopped him. "Prison dragon, after you go to dominate Shinkong Ancient Road, by the way, kill someone for this seat." Oh! Prison dragon raised an eyebrow, became interested, and asked, "Who to kill?" Bingyu Extreme turned over with his right hand, and suddenly a black mirror appeared in his hand, and handed it to the prisoner. "Just kill the man in the mirror." The prisoner looked down at the Xuanguang mirror, and saw that there was a young man in a black robe holding a scarlet sword and cold eyes. "Who is he?" Prison Dragon asked with a brow raised. "Blood Sword." Bingyu Supreme spit out 2 words indifferently. At the same time, in the ancient road that dominates the sky, Jian Wushuang and How Emperor dominated the 2, and entered the 10th city. Master Bloodsword, in front of which is one of the 9 giants, where Lord Lan is. How Emperor said, pointing to the largest fortress in the 10th city. Master Bloodsword, the first 10 cities and the last 8 cities are not the same in the Shinkong ancient road. The owner of the 10th city, also known as Zhengguanxi, Clearance Wenyu Master Lan is the ambassador of the 10th city. Jian Wushuang nodded after hearing the words, and replied, "Let's go and meet the Blue Master for a while." They walked towards the fort. Along the way, many people focused their eyes on Jian Wushuang. "This person is a blood sword." Sure enough, I knew that the blood sword would come to the 10th city, and thus the 8th city. In the last 8 cities, there are many good friends of Tianxi Langjun. The blood sword enters the 8th city, for fear that trouble will follow. I just don't know if he can pass the test of Lord Lan. The sword had no sides and no expression, as if I had not heard these discussions, and approached the huge fortress building step by step. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.